Brave adventurers, stalwart companions, dare you delve into the world of the Stanley Parable? You dare! With your friend Bucket at your side, nothing is impossible. Nothing is unassailable. Frodo would have achieved his mission a lot quicker if he'd have had a Bucket in the Fellowship. Just think about it. Makes sense. Hey folks, it's Kikoskia here, and welcome back to Let's Ultra Deluxe play the Stanley Parable 2. When last we left off, we discovered the joy of the number 3, and that everyone loves watching videos of silly birds. It is now time to seek another ending. Seek more figurines. Oh, we did find one of those, by the way. And seek more fun. And more inputs.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Maybe we had.
No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
I imagine the figurines are a way to get you to places where you'd find new endings with the help of the bucket. Speaking of the bucket. Oh, Bucket, my friend.
Warmth spread through Stanley's arms. With the bucket in his arms again, he was home.
There's no input here. No input for me to find. That said, there is a balloon sat there, looking at the screen, doing work. Nothing here for me to do. No, there's... And I can't go back to my office. Won't let me. I suppose I must just press forward, press on, and have no inputs to input. For now. The door's not closed yet, but it will close.
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
That I did. No input there. No input anywhere here. And no figurines found. But we may find one soon. Not even going to bother. But stairs!
Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office.
No, we didn't. We went this way. Down here. Ooh, there it is!
Okay, I'm going back to the name of these little Stanley figurines, and now I'm torn between Stanlerines and Figlies. What do you think, Stanley? What name better encapsulates the intrinsic sense of happiness that you get from seeing a small number in the corner of your screen go up by 1? Let me sit on it. I'm sure it will come to me.
I'm sure it will. We have the figurine. The Figly. Right, let's go. This way. To mystery.
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. He looked down at the bucket in his arms. Am I crazy? He asked the bucket. The bucket returned his gaze, but said nothing at all. That's strange, Stanley thought. Usually the bucket is a source of guidance and wisdom for me in difficult times such as these. He held the bucket close, yet felt none of its familiar reassurance and comfort. And that's when Stanley realized, this isn't my bucket. It's just a normal, everyday bucket. Someone else's bucket, perhaps.
What?
How did I end up with someone else's bucket? This is all terribly wrong.
What?
Surely no good would come from this. Who knows what sorts of bizarre hallucinations Stanley might experience without the psychologically grounding presence of his bucket.
What?
And indeed, now he noticed that the rooms were repeating, which was, of course, very odd. And now he felt himself floating off the ground. Oh, gracious.
Oh no!
He exclaimed. Without my bucket, I've gone truly mad.
What?
Where is it? I must find it. Far
Bucket!
off in the distance now, he heard it, calling to him.
Stanley! Stanley, it's me! The bucket!
Bucket!
Could it truly be? He rushed forward from room to room, passing by one bucket after the next. None of them were his. None of them were his special bucket.
Bucket!
Come to me, Stanley! Find me!
I'm trying!
He had to find the bucket. He had to return to his old friend. It was the only way to truly restore his sanity. And then suddenly, he froze dead in his tracks. He knew where the voice of the bucket had been coming from.
Where?
The real bucket was inside of him all along. It was incredibly painful. Stanley doubled over in agony and blacked out.
Huh?
This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, picked up her bucket of comfort and security, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town, talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. Right away, she knew what the problem was. This man had no bucket. Of course he'd gone mad, ranting and raving about a narrator describing all of his actions and how everything is predetermined and free will is an illusion and it's all just a video game. It could all have been prevented if only he'd taken his bucket with him. Perhaps he didn't even realize he'd forgotten his bucket at home in the first place. How cruel the world can be, Mariella thought, and she hugged her own bucket even tighter. But of course, she had no time for this. There were a myriad of confusing problems she would soon have to confront at work, for which her bucket would provide absolute guidance and total clarity on everything. Heck yes, she thought to herself, my life kicks ass. And she backflipped all the way to work.
That takes some doing, backflipping all the way to work. Poor Stanley. It's okay, we're back. The bucket is just ahead. We'll be okay.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Nothing this
No matter
time.
how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Alright. Any inputs to put in? No, not this time. But there is the bucket.
Stanley picked up the bucket and smiled. He'd never be alone again, not truly alone, not with the bucket around.
Good old bucket. Ever dependable bucket, ever reliable bucket. I've missed you. Right. I know what ending we need to do now. I know where we need to go.
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
That we did. We're going this way. There's a passageway we didn't take. Now there's only 2 more statues to find. A large room with boxes and some are both red and blue. We'll uncover them. And we're not going in there. Because why would we?
Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office.
That we did. We also went this way. Oh! That's a room. We'll go there another time.
Stepping into his manager's office,
But now
Stanley
here.
was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. But Stanley guessed the correct code by sheer luck.
The code we weren't
Was it
asked
the
about.
bucket knew all along?
He
Was
did.
the bucket guiding him?
Indeed.
Yes. This is certainly the most logical
It's
explanation.
the only explanation. The only one that makes sense. Right, let's go. This way. To the only place we can still go. The only place that makes sense down here. Certain doom.
Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read, Mind Control Facility.
Ha! Joke's on you! The bucket can't read.
Although this passageway had the word escape written on it, the truth was that at the end of this hall, Stanley and the bucket would both meet a violent death.
I'll believe it when I see it, narrator. Can't fool me.
The door behind them was not shut. Stanley and the bucket still had every opportunity to turn around and get back on track.
The bucket will protect me. You know it, I know it,
At
we
this
all know
point,
it.
Stanley and the bucket were knowingly walking forward into a very painful death for each of them.
Can buckets even die? Let's find out! Woohoo! And here we go! Oh, we can. Well, that's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate. Magic powers bucket, activate?
As the machine whirred into motion and Stanley and the bucket inched closer to their demise, Stanley reflected on how meaningless the bucket's warmth and comfort had turned out to be.
That's not
To
true.
be sure, it puts the mind and the soul at ease to embrace the bucket. But what use is a sense of ease when you're about to be crushed to death? This is what Stanley thought to himself, and he sort of kicked himself for wasting so much time carrying a bucket everywhere.
Well, now you mention it.
Farewell, Stanley.
And... aha.
"Farewell, Stanley," cried the narrator, as Stanley and the bucket were led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, the bucket's life came to an end, as it was crushed violently to death.
I'm sorry. My life isn't important in this equation?
It was a shame, the death of such a magnificent bucket.
What?
It's true that all buckets are radiant in their own way, but this one stood above the rest. It was a glorious bucket to behold.
What? The bucket. Welcome to the grand exhibit. You are standing at the precipice of knowledge. Much like a bucket itself, the human mind is frequently empty within, a cavernous void, but through use of the exhibit in front of you, the mind becomes full and enriched and substantiated. Knowledge of the bucket and its history is the only true knowledge we really have. Will you take what you learn here with you into the world? Will you accept with an open mind what may be challenging about the information in this exhibit? Will you change the lives of yourself and your loved ones as a result of this exhibit? Or will you turn a blind eye and continue to live as you were, in ignorance and darkness? Well, it's time to get educated, folks. Educated on the only thing that matters. Buckets.
Can you see how arrogant it was for Stanley to take a bucket like this and to claim it for his own? Can you see the hubris that blinded him? Can you see that the bucket is far more noble than Stanley will ever be in his short life?
Oh, buckets. 25 buckets. A photograph of 25 buckets. The greatest number of buckets ever captured on camera. The photographer experienced catatonic shock for several weeks as a result of the euphoria from exposure to this many buckets at once. Okay, I think there might be slightly more than 25 buckets. Just a little more than 25 buckets. A bucket with 2 handles. This bucket is depicted as having 2 handles. Such a design has never been created in real life, having been deemed too dangerous and recklessly experimental. Every year, dozens are put to death just for attempting it. I mean, it's just too potent, too mighty. Inferno bucket, a replica of the Inferno bucket, which in the medieval era was so powerfully alluring that it drove dozens of nations to war with one another for control of it. Billions died, and yet in spite of it all, the simple fact remains, no one can control a bucket. Or can they? The stress bucket, an analogy, presented without commentary. Worrying, negative forecasting, negative thinking, lack of reassurance. Vulnerability equals strength, size and strength of the bucket. Stress, the level of water in the bucket. Coping strategies equals holes. Rest and relaxation, doing something you enjoy. Rest and relaxation. Chair. What life was like without the bucket, folks. Cave drawing. While we know that buckets predate the existence of mankind, we do not know by how long. This cave drawing depicts early man's discovery of the practical uses of the bucket, by which time the bucket had already likely been around for several millennia. Notice in these drawings how the bucket is allowing itself to be used, having judged humanity to be worthy of its treasures. Many are the uses of bucket. Glorious bucket!
No man can own a bucket. and certainly not a bucket as dazzling to behold as this one. It is man who should kneel before the bucket.
Kneel before the bucket? Ooh. The hanging bucket. This piece symbolizes the necessary relationship between bucket and humanity. However clear our grasp of the bucket may be, there is yet more that is always out of reach. This distance, inevitability, is for our own good. But bucket! But I need it. How can I tell it how great the number 3 is if I don't... I'm coming, bucket! Ah, see? You're right here. You and I, bucket. You and I defy the very laws of physics to get you. We'll be together forever, bucket.
But there is something we can do. Something we can do together, you and I, that will right this terrible wrong.
Oh?
Let Stanley die. Let him be crushed by the machine.
Oh.
Don't reset the game. Don't give him another opportunity to run off with another beautiful bucket. We can save the world's buckets from their treatment as tools and implements if only we let Stanley die together. The bucket shall take its place as ruler, as leader, as commander of a new world, a new vision.
That may have also crushed the bucket. The bucket might also have been crushed. I'm just saying. Might have also been crushed. But it's okay. It's all okay. We have the bucket ahead of us. The bucket is all. The bucket is everything. The bucket is the future! Oh, glorious bucket. What? You think I'm getting a bit too hung up on the bucket? How can you say that? It's a bucket! You just don't understand. When you have a bucket of your own, you'll understand. You'll all understand. And when we come back, folks, we shall go and adventure further with the bucket. Seek more glorious bucket-related shenanigans. You could say we're crossing things off our bucket list. You get it? Because it's a bucket? It's a list of... Never mind. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're not. If you are subscribed, press that bell for those notifications. And I'll catch you next time, folks. And I'll see you then. Later. What if I should change my name to Kikoskia? It doesn't really work, does it? But I could make it work. I should probably stay as Kikoskia. The bucket probably has their own channel. Probably got 5 bajillion subscribers too. That's just how awesome the bucket is. I'm rambling, aren't I? Yes, I am. But when it's about the bucket, how could you not? Later.